Hey everyone, this is Jordan MML. This should be my sit down and review video number. I forgot what number, but it's Mimi. Yeah, so just a quick intro if you haven't seen this before. I'm just gonna review the characters from. It's well, I mean, in the end, it is my opinion, but I'm gonna be reviewing them from mainly a gameplay perspective. Basically, what perks they have, what their base stats are as it relates to how you might play the character, and the passive that they have, quote unquote, if the character comes with one, and how playing the character may be efficient in some ways, maybe not, and just more my perspective on how that works. So without further ado, let's just get into it. I'll go through basically some parts of the character in terms of the game as well, not just the character itself. But yeah, we're moving on to Mimi. Mimi is, I think, in my mind, a better character than some of the others, but by a small amount. And what I mean by that is, when you play True Believer, which is how my reviews go, I'm mainly reviewing them from a True Believer standpoint, but this also applies to other difficulties and endless mode as well. Mimi's at least starts with a scalpel, which is a knowledge weapon, and it's an okay weapon. I consider it more the Carpenter's hammer for knowledge-based characters or knowledge-based builds. What I mean by that is for characters that you might be building knowledge maybe due to a lighthouse check, or maybe just you are playing Mimi. Then using the scalpel pretty much guarantees you a prep attack, which is pretty much 8 damage per turn, plus or minus any damage that you may receive or lose because of the run that you're currently in. And then Mimi herself is, like I said, I'll get into the base stats when I get there, but I think she's an okay character as well. Maybe a little better, and mainly because I value weapons, free weapons, quote unquote. But I mean, the definition of that, for those who don't know, is basically weapons you can pick up that aren't really too hard to get, though usually those weapons are below average or just an average weapon. So we're gonna move into let's hit the True Believer really quick. I'm also gonna go through a soft run for those who don't know. Whether I survive or not doesn't really matter. It's more just to talk about the character in my review with some commentary of what I'm doing as it relates to the character. Let's get into the backstories. World of War is pretty much the normal backstory, but if you are playing on True Believer, then, well, Mimi starts off with the scalpel, which is a knowledge-based weapon. So like I said, as long as your knowledge remains at 8, probably even 7 as well, then you get a free prep attack. What this doesn't allow you to do is, well, brace comfortably, because if you're against an enemy with high power, then you're not guaranteed to get that normal attack, and if you decide to brace, there's that. And I talk about bracing mainly because I choose to brace. Obviously, I'm more talking about it objectively, so if you do want to brace, just know that if you are using the scalpel, you might experience not 100% accuracy when trying to hit it. Otherwise, kicking is just fine as well, so that's something you can do. But as it relates to the World of War backstory, that's what I'm more saying towards. No, nothing good, nothing bad, either way. And Mimi works just fine because, but I consider it more useful to start off with the scalpel because you're playing Mimi. Secondly is there's also her passive as well, but we'll get into that when we get into the run as well. There's also medical history, which, whether you consider it part of the lore or not, as part of Mimi's character, medical history, you do have to make sure that if you do get injuries from encounters, then you have some way to recover from them, because you do start off with bandages, but that only heals one minor injury. Mimi does have perks that help her in encounters and defeating encounters, but they don't really help you with the injury, though obviously any perk that works in encounters, whether it's through recovery, damage, or otherwise, is still pretty good, and it helps out with medical history. That way, at least you're dealing with an injury with recovery with it, as opposed to just having no perks to deal with encounters, and just working with medical history and getting injured, and to basically taking more bad things than just one bad thing. Hunted by the Cold, solving mysteries reduces more doom, which is nice for Mimi if you run into encounters. That way you're healing yourself with her perks or making use of her perks while dealing with the combat encounters. Granted, you do have to make sure that the cult members that are the unique combat encounters don't end up outright killing you or causing you to fail the run, but that extra doom loss is really, really nice, especially if you can make it to the end, as all characters make it to the end, and the Hunted by the Cult run allows you more doom. just by its own design. But like I said, if you don't have ways to deal with the encounters that you may run into, it's still RNG in the end, but at least Mimi has her own ways of dealing with them because all the cult members are humans, which one of her perks helps out with. So she's a little bit better here, but you do have to make sure you still don't die. The 7th curse, no allies but more funds, can help you out if you want to replace your scalpel with something else. Otherwise, not having any allies isn't really a minus because, well, Mimi doesn't have any, is not designed around allies. However, if you do want to get allies, that is, you do have to keep that in mind, but the extra funds I consider with Mimi is still better, especially considering her passive, the negative of one of her passives, along with, well, starting out with the scalpel, you might want to replace it. I would usually replace it, but if it works just fine, it doesn't really mean much. So 7th curse is also okay for Mimi. Just make sure that, you know, if you are trying to get allies, then, well, like all characters, that's something you have to work around. Although it hurts Mimi a lot less than, say, Mizuki. And then there's Ill-Fated. All event stat checks automatically fail, as opposed to, say, Aiko, who has a perk that heals her for succeeding stat checks. Mimi's perks at least circumvent Ill-Fated somewhat, so it doesn't really hurt her, but there's no real synergy with Ill-Fated, as opposed to one other character that I've yet to review. But Ill-Fated is pretty much bad for all characters, so I don't really slam Mimi here. However, like I said, Mimi's perks do help with recovery and making the best of encounters, so though your event stat checks will automatically fail, with game knowledge and with her perks, you can work out just fine if you're on a character-specific perk run. If you're on an all-perk run, then even then still, at least starting with the scalpel helps you out with encounters in case you can't find a place to pick up a free weapon, whether there's a weapon that you know where to get, or just a weapon you pick up from RNG. So, in the end, like I said, Mimi, in my mind, has more pluses along the backstories, but you're just still at the mercy of RNG, which is why she's not amazing, but the free weapon is one of my biggest pluses for her. Going into the gods, first Spider God, cannot run from encounters. Mimi, like I said, Mimi does have perks to deal with encounters that I'll go over during the run, but having those perks, if you get them immediately, is really, really nice. Otherwise, early game without any perks and with the negative side of her passive, then you might want to be very careful in encounters. So there's that, since you can't run. Same thing with the Thotu, extra damage. However, that is extra damage for her prep attack if you decide to brute force encounters that way. That way you're getting 10 damage every turn. However, you do have to make sure that the enemy isn't pounding on you, like I said, during the early game or in the late game. If you don't happen to pick up any good perks or don't have the preparation, then Thotu can be a bit of a run stopper, at least in your 4th mystery onward, when enemies are doing 1+ more damage with the bonus damage they already get from Thotu. But like I said, with Mimi, you could get your own damage boost depending on the encounters you face because of one of the perks. Because if the encounter does not feature a certain type of enemy, then you don't benefit from one of our perks. Otherwise, use another one of our perks to level up faster, which can help with recovery, or her other perk that helps you recover after encounters. But yeah, like I said, this is extra damage you're taking, so do keep that in mind. You do have to keep that in mind. I is the neutral run for Mimi. You get an extra spell. Casting spells cost Doom instead, so that is just an extra choice you have if you happen to pick up a spell in an I run. Doesn't really synergize or interact with Mimi, but because of that, then like I said, it's more neutral for her. Same thing for Goizo. Goizo, resting has a higher Doom penalty, but since Mimi does have a recovery perk on her own, then she somewhat mitigates this to some extent. On a True Believer run, it's more valuable because you have less max reason, especially with her passive, but like I said, it's not as neutral as I, but it is still somewhat neutral in terms of how it affects Mimi. Like I said, Mimi does have her ways to circumvent this, and it depends on the backstory combination as well, but Goizo is somewhat more neutral than, say, Thotu and Spider God, which does, to be fair, Spider God and Thotu affect other characters a lot more as well, but Mimi at least synergizes well with her perks, or at least her perks help her in all of these runs equally, except for, like I said, where if you decide to use spells, it's a random bag. Without further ado, let's just get into a Thotu run. Maybe I should have changed my backstory, but it's fine. Character exclusive perk cards only, because this is a Mimi review, and we'll move on to her passive first. Might as well talk about it since it shows you immediately when coming here. Mimi's Obsession, minus 20% max reason. This, strangely enough, rounds up, so where another character has 13 reason. On a True Believer run, you would think since it rounds down, 10% of 13 is 1.3, times 2 is 2.6. So if it usually things round down in this game, this one happens to round up, so now you only have 10 reasons instead of 13. So that is a minus for her on a True Believer run, or any other difficulty, but on a True Believer, obviously each point is more valuable, so you do only have 10 reason to work with. That said, you do have a free weapon, so that's the balancing factor in playing as Mimi, at least starting out. Going over her base stats, 6 strength, 5 dexterity, 7 perception, 8 knowledge, 7 charisma. It's okay, it's average, like all characters, except for one character specifically. Well, 2 really, at least starting off the bat. Mimi does have the overall equal points to most characters, but they're just distributed differently. For her, obviously, it's in 8 into knowledge, so her attacks do 56, which means prep 40 plus 56, 96. But if you lose 1 knowledge, then, well, you kind of go. Also, your chance to hit is not very high, which is why I consider it more a below average weapon, especially if enemies happen to have high power. Strength and dexterity, some people might be turning away from Mimi because of this, because if you pick up a weapon, then, or you get another weapon that's either strength or, well, usually strength-based. If you use a steak knife, then you're dexterity-based. Then, well, you don't get as much turns, or you might not be able to brace properly, or get enough turns. I consider it more equal because, like with every other character I've said before, it's mostly the item usually overwrites whatever stat I'm building into. However, if you are the type to build into a stat, not only does it help you with stat checks, theoretically it still does. Each point is about 5%. So if you do decide to build to strength or dex, if not just for Lighthouse, then that's a valid reason to go with Mimi as well, because at least her strength is at 6, and her dex you kind of have to work on. But like I said, you have to be using a dex weapon, so strength is more usually what you might pick up. And like I said, if you have the knowledge Lighthouse check, which I do have, and the charisma one, which I do have as well, she at least starts off with 7 charisma, so that you can try to build into charisma early, both for events and for herself. We're gonna go set the city history right here, and we'll be on our way. So without further ado, let me just get to the perks while I go through this setup here. Her first perk is Anatomy class, extra damage against human enemies. This is more just a one-to-one, and what I mean by that is the description says extra damage, it's 1 damage. So we're be doing 4 with the scalpel right now. If I had this perk and I fought against a human type enemy, I would be doing 5 damage per attack as well. And that's true for, I think, a strong attack as well. Whoop, now I kind of forgot. But if that's not the case, if it does do more damage, that makes it better. If not, still, if you're in mysteries, like, say, I'm in Eels and I go to apartments and I run to the Stalker here, then it'd be useful if I had it. Otherwise, well, then it's not as useful for mysteries where where most bosses that you run into are usually going to be Eldritch types, so you don't benefit from it here. But if you are fighting a lot of human enemies, or you plan to fight human enemies based on mysteries or investigations you're doing, then, well, you get to benefit from this perk, so which is really, really nice. Her second, so we'll move on to the second perk. Her second perk is Fast Learner. The description says getting damaged in combat grants a small experience bonus. This experience bonus is actually a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of how much damage you receive. So for example, if an enemy does 1 stamina damage, then whatever damage you take, regardless if you brace or not. So say it was doing 2, but I decide to brace. If I take 1 stamina damage, I get 1 experience. If an enemy does, say, -3 all damage, then if I take 3 stamina, 3 reason damage, then I get 6 experience, and so on and so forth. So this perk, but to me this perk is kind of a strange one. I mean, it's experience, so if it's the only perk you have as opposed to a generic one that you don't want, then I guess you could take it. Otherwise, you do have to, at least you'd have to have a plan for receiving the damage, because obviously you can only get more experience if you get damaged a lot more. Otherwise, if you can take this perk later, say in your 3rd, 4th, or 5th, or the later you take this perk, just like Anatomy class, if you run to a lot of human enemies, or her 3rd perk where you get to recover based on encounters, then, well, you don't benefit from it as much because, well, you're taking damage without the perk, then that's the experience you're not getting. So, like I said, that's the balance behind that perk. If you don't take enough damage, if you're not taking enough damage with the perk, then you don't benefit from the experience gain. But if you take too much damage, you could just end up dying. So that's just what you have to plan around. That I'm not trying to put that in a bad light. That's just the reality of what you have to deal with if you take Fast Learner as a perk, knowing and you're purposely trying to get experience through it. Otherwise, usually you would be more passive about it, where you just take damage and you get experience, which is nice. So if you're taking damage anyway and you have the perk, then it's just free experience. So you can think about it in that way as well. Last but not least, Mimi only has 3 perks. Unlike some sources say, Adrenaline is not a Mimi perk, but so Mimi only has 3 perks. Her third and last perk is First Aid. Defeating an enemy regains 2 reason. This is supposed to counteract her passive, which starts you off with less max reason. Therefore, if you do take this perk, then effectively, especially if you're running into encounters, which you probably will be at some point in your run, then every time you defeat an enemy, you get 2 reason. So every enemy you fight, even if you just defeat, assuming you even face at least 2 enemies, that already gets you the max reason that you lose from your passive. However, if you don't take First Aid at all, then you're just stuck with the max reason. So I consider this perk higher on my priority list as opposed to Fast Learner and Anatomy class. So my priority list would probably be First Aid, Anatomy class, and then Fast Learner. Again, First Aid, Anatomy class, and then Fast Learner. I feel like I repeated that, but mainly, like I said, mainly to taking First Aid to both counteract her Mimi's obsession status, on top of, well, just being able to heal reason throughout your run. Because the max reason, when you think about it, a max reason loss is more reason loss over time, because sometimes you might want to heal, but you can't heal other because you're already topped off at 10 reason. Playing as Mimi anyway. So that's what First Aid would be good for. Also, First Aid, like Anatomy class, are also used for events, which if you do run into them is just an extra minuscule small bonus if you happen to run into it. Otherwise, well, like I said, you're still taking First Aid anyway, because if you run into an encounter and defeat it, I mean, you either die, which means you're dead anyway, or you defeat the encounter or defeat the enemy and you get 2 reason. So that's really, really nice for me. Hey, this is Jared and MML, editing this in post. First Aid is not useful if you plan to run from enemies, because obviously you haven't defeated the enemy, so you don't get reason there. So if you plan to run a lot more often, that's a reason you're losing out. But usually most people like to defeat enemies, so they're getting the reason, so it's kind of balances out. But you do have to note that if you run from encounters, you don't get reason. Although the purpose is usually to avoid damage, but that is something you have to consider. Overall, Mimi is, well, she's okay. Like I said, she's okay. She's better for me because on a True Believer run where you're working with lower max stamina, max reason, at least you start off with a weapon, which means you're not stuck kicking, so that can break thresholds early on. However, later on, if you don't pick up perks or if you don't have enough preparation, then you're still stuck with the scalpel while enemies are being scaled up per mystery, which cannot be good. Also, running to Apartment Stalker, you might want to really consider bracing because, well, not bracing gets you the status effect where you lose 1 knowledge, which for Mimi makes a difference because, just to show it off right now, if you prep attack with your weapon, if I had, let's see, 7, well, will I still make it? It seems like it will, yeah. So if you still have 7 knowledge, you'll still be okay, but that is less knowledge you're working with for the rest of the mystery. So just do it, because in the end it's more. I mean, I shouldn't have, because bracing right now is netting me the same amount. Also, if I braced there, I probably would have saved me if I hit it, because it was not guaranteed. I had, I think, a 65 to 75% chance to hit if I decided to brace, so... But Varnish U was on my side, so like I said, min-maxing with every character is important. For Mimi, it's more important because, well, you have less reason to work with, so... that being said... Do I want to use anything else? Probably 24% Doom. I have arms into school, so I do actually have more Doom to work with. Let's see here. This is reason loss. Only funds loss if I fail this, so let's go for it. Okay, good. And let's take this level up and try to figure out what I want to do. So usually I'll take, yeah, like I said, if I have first aid, I'll take it over generic perk. And let's actually, I need about 10 knowledge to break a threshold. Otherwise, I would go into charisma here. That's something I've, with all characters, but also Mimi as well, because like I said, she starts out with 7 charisma. If you do decide to build an 8, it's ultimately the same if you decide to use the level up to heal reason in preparation for the lighthouse. Of course, there are trade-offs. The trade-off here specifically is that if you do build into charisma and you're like, yeah, good, I'm good for the lighthouse. I have 8 into whatever stat, not just charisma. But if you get an injury that lowers it, then you don't make it to the lighthouse, then you've lost whatever stamina or reason that you've prepped the lighthouse for. So there's that trade-off. However, if you build into reason instead, the good part is it's immediate healing. The bad news is, well, your stat is lower, so that is still overall around a 5% loss to all stat checks that you could have increased. So like I said, if I had 7 charisma but healed 3 reason instead, well, that's 7 charisma I'm working with every charisma stat check. So that's the trade-off there. And for Mimi, that, like I said, that is the trade-off. We're trading this tiny key for a sports rifle because Mimi starts out with 7 perception, and well, in the end, you're ultimately, if you're gonna prep, you only get 1 attack anyway. But since we know when we're gonna run to the scissor lady, then we can stop before the boss encounter. That way I can keep the scalpel on. That said, I should also be putting this away. Also, I'm just gonna fail the ritual on purpose for the sake of getting the cursed scissors, which is another knowledge weapon. So that could be good. We're not gonna run into plant enemies here, so put the fatal flora away. But like I said, Cursed Scissors is a knowledge-based weapon, and it does a lot of damage, so you might want to consider getting it, but if that is what you plan to do, just realize that the Scissor Lady will have a lot more HP, and she does 1 more damage, I believe. So, and with the Dotu, she'll be doing 2 damage. So I might want to look at my stamina or reason. If I'm more healthy, if I had more stamina and reason, then I should be just fine. Otherwise, well, I'll probably be dying to reason because now I have this stamina to survive. So it's still looking at the cost. If I look at the cost right now, then what I'm looking at is, well, I'm trading a curse if I have to heal stamina, and any reason or stamina that I lose as opposed to just fighting her regularly, to getting cursed scissors, where if I did the ritual correctly, then I'm saving, quote-unquote, on stamina and or reason. And we'll do one more. Do I want to keep the scalpel on? Oddly enough, take a detour. So we're going to equip the sports rifle here because it's still going to be overall more damage. But we will need to eat this lump of... Well, let's wait on this, actually. Because if I get a curse like, say, suicidal or paranoia, which I believe are both these... damage proccing perks, where if you take 1 damage from stat or reason, then you have a chance of losing the other. There's that. So, Scissor Woman, I do have Kana with me, mitigating damage, so that's helping me out. And if I took her as my 4th or 5th mystery, then she'd be doing 3 all, as opposed to 2 all. And if I didn't have Kana, she'd be doing 4 all, and she'd be doing 3 all instead of 2 all. And so here's where, like I said, if you're working with the numbers here, then it helps to work with the numbers. That said, I should be throwing my items, but I want to see... Let's see, this is going to be 4. Scalpel is actually only minus 1 damage, but it could break a threshold. Otherwise, I just end up selling it later, but we'll see. We are going to throw both bats just to see where we're at. And the hunting rifle, if you do get it for with arms, does do more, so that's why this run is more... And this is all for the Cursed Scissors for Mimi, but it's more doable once you've done arms because this does 15 damage per shot. However, I would like to... Is there any way I could break her down? The scalpel does 1. If I get this attack... So if I do here, I can only take -1. So let's see if this even hits. I missed the attack, so... Actually, I'm kind of stuck in this now. I might as well just try it again. I do have to throw this, though. That way I can break the threshold next turn. But either way, like I said, and as also she did that, so if I didn't brace there, I would have taken both a status effect and extra damage. So we're just going to fire her and she should die. So overall, like I said, if you're bracing and taking that chance, you might as well take it again. If you don't hit both attacks, then that's just really more unfortunate. So we're going to take Fast Learner here. We might as well. Charisma and Knowledge, we could take both of these. I could double stack into Knowledge right now, especially with the Curse. Yeah, you know what? So if I did take Fast Learner, those would be more experience. If I managed to get a level up off this, if I was smarter and was able to predict my run, actually I should have waited to look at my mysteries, but we'll find out. But if this helps you level up once more before the run ends, then it's more efficient to take Fast Learner here. Otherwise, I take Folklore Studies for less RNG because I know I'm getting 2 knowledge. And then what I can do is equip the Cursed Scissors. This will be more Doom for me, but the chance of proccing Doom is supposed to be outweighed by the damage or efficiency of the Cursed Scissors itself. It does 7 damage, 90 speed with 10 knowledge, then it's 60 speed. So I can get guaranteed prep if I need to, and it has a higher chance to hit than my Scalpel. It just has a chance of raising Doom by 1%, which is something I do have to deal with. Go into Bath, heal Stamina, because I'm missing Stamina. I do have Lump of Flesh, but I'm not going to rely on having that. And we're going to take Household Health first. That way when we go into Festival, we can get free healing. However, that does mean that I cannot go back into... any of these stores and whatnot once I get into it. Let's try to ignore this. Thank you. That's a strength check, but it was 50-50. So it was 50-50 to me, unless I was getting a modifier, which it would mean it's more 45%. But I'm willing to roll on it. It's RNG in the end. Sometimes, that's something I like to say, but you do have to keep in mind, RNG, it's still theoretically, you have to look at the theoretical, so I shouldn't really be ignoring it, but there's that. Also, you're usually not allowed to take more than... Well, I mean, here's how you know the game. Because I don't actually have 2 funds. I think I have 12 funds right now. So, let's lose the reason here. So I have 12 funds right now. I just can't see. So what I could do is just take 2 cigarettes. That is... I do have a lot of Doom to work with. It is a lot of Doom to work with. 40% on your 4th mystery is a really good place to be. Let's smoke one now in case we get run into an encounter. But I shouldn't really be running into any other problems. I could go to the store to get something else. Maybe the occult shop, but I'd be risking just in case I get a lot of Doom. So let's hold off on that for now, and we'll keep going. Otherwise, it'd be a good idea to run into things. This cat is going to get slaughtered, which is going to be unfortunate. Unless I just miss both of these attacks, but... Yeah, so it's like I said, this is just planning around Mimi, getting the Cursed Scissors, which is knowledge-based, and getting the generic knowledge plus perk, and increasing knowledge allows me to break that specific threshold, along with maybe getting me more knowledge. I should look into that specific event just to look at the... I usually just take the guaranteed out because you're not dealing with RNG. So like I said, that's just unfortunate there. If I went to the occult shop and got a Holy Candle, then I could have actually just saved myself both on reason and decreased my Doom, but, you know... I'm heading to the festival, so what could kill me since I didn't go to a shop before I stuck here, because basically for the rest of this run I can't visit any more shops, so there's that. Also, having 10 or higher knowledge is less RNG on your knowledge-based stat checks anymore, so if you know where stat checks are in the game, I'm not on a Spider God run, so let's actually run from this, otherwise I'd be taking damage. But like I said, if you have 10 or more of a stat, and you know where the stat checks are, then you can make efficient use of your events. Granted, that is based on your knowledge of the game, so... But for Mimi specifically, running into knowledge-based stat checks does really help you out. I'm more stuck with generic perks, because really I only have... yeah, so first aid... Well, I only have 1 Mimi perk, but I'm... So let's try to reroll once, try to get one. So let's take... I'm headed into... Festival, so I actually might run to more plant monsters or enemies. But I think if we run to Takeshi-san, let's just take anatomy class just in case we run into a human enemy. Otherwise, no, let's take Fast Learner. No, I have Cursed Scissors, so I might be one-shotting things, so it might be more efficient for me to take this instead. And we'll heal stamina because I think, well, actually, if we leveled up again, I should have taken strength if I have the strength stat check. I don't, so I do have the second mystery, which was arms? Yeah, arms. I have dex and then light, so really that's just RNG though, so that's not really Mimi's fault. But as Mimi, knowing that I need to level up 3 times to put it into dex specifically, which isn't really helpful. I'm maxed out, so I can take experience there. And let's just go. If I didn't take the emergency funds out, okay, I did. Otherwise, I'd like an odd number of funds, just in case I get pickpocketed a whole bunch of times, which shouldn't really affect. If you have 6 funds, actually, you won't really need to worry. I can wait on that, so but I don't really need to rest. Take the safe route. That's only Doom. I have Doom to work with, so I should be fine for now. Otherwise, I'm just going to, like I said, doing things like heading into here to get free investigations. That way, I don't have to deal with the I would rather deal with no RNG as opposed to, because this is basically a village investigation, which could get you an encounter or a bad event. However, the plus side to doing it is, well, it's still an event with RNG, so there's a chance that you get a good outcome. Otherwise, once we're in the forest here, like I said, oh, I should have taken my Fatal Flora out. I meant to do that. I promised that I did. But that, like, again, that's not Mimi's fault. That's my fault, and it works with any character as well. If I had an extra point of knowledge, I'd actually be able to do 4 attacks. But I do have Nicotine Rush, so that's not really fair to say either. But I do, if I hit all of these, then I should be able to one-shot. So I really only this first one, which I did miss. Nice RNG. Like I said, that's not actually Mimi's fault, though. I missed 80% twice. Are you serious? Like I said, but that's not Mimi's fault. Obviously, I would have just one-shot her. And yeah, like I said, I started getting a bunch of Doom events. So, ooh, I have nicotine withdrawal. Confront. Nice. Like I said, now that my Doom has just started shooting through the roof, now I could run into trouble. I could actually die to Doom here. Barring the lighthouse. I should be okay, though. I do get out of here right now, so if for some reason, if I do have Takashi-san, I forgot to check again. I think I do, right? We'll see when I get into there again. Otherwise, I don't really need to worry about anything in Lighthouse. I can't die anymore because I'm way past the threshold for Lighthouse, which is 10 stamina, 7 reason. If you don't care at all, obviously I think I'm way above because I'm going to take 3 stamina, 3 reason. But like I said, if you want to be completely safe and you don't really want to read the sigils and whatnot, I don't have Takashi-san here. It seems like, I mean, it's there, but I won't be running into it because it gives you more than you expect. So let's just mash through just to make this spicy. But as you can see, just looking at Mimi with the cursed scissors, yeah, you can do a lot of damage, especially once you build into 9 or 10 knowledge. Then you definitely get 3 attacks. 3 times 8 is a lot. Also, yeah, I guess another thing I forgot is I'm using cursed scissors, so that would raise their doom by a lot more. So actually, you actually want more doom than you expect. Let's just take, oh, well, I can do that. But yeah, using the cursed scissors, you do have to make sure you give yourself some leeway for doom, because if you're one-shotting things, they're probably doing 2 or 3 attacks, which is on average about 1% doom per encounter, so you do have to make sure you work around that. But if you, like I said, that is specifically a Mimi thing, or any other character that uses it. I say Mimi because you're using more knowledge, because she starts off with more knowledge, and if you build into knowledge, then you're probably using the scissors if you pick them up. Otherwise, I might have been just fine with the scalpel. In that case, I probably would have run fast learner with my scalpel. Then I could just get out of the scissor lady, and well, that's another timeline though. However, in conclusion, like I said, Mimi starting out with the weapon on True Believer is pretty nice. That way it helps you defeat encounters more easily. As you saw, in arms, it helped me get out of ghost encounter in the Department Stalker. Going into the Scissor Woman, I used the hunting rifle, but well, that's more on that. And I did end up throwing the scalpel, which allowed me to just shoot the Scissor Lady, and because, well, I braced into an attack, and if I successfully braced into a successful attack, I would have only taken -1 all damage. Then I would have been able to throw the scalpel and then just shoot this Scissor Woman on that turn as well. So overall, just to close out this video, her perks, okay, in an all perk run, I would probably still take First Aid, considering that I'm on True Believer with any other character, unless I see a free damage perk overall. Anatomy damage is a damage perk, so I might take that as well, but it's not, say, Core Strength from Haru, where you just get damage across the board for all enemies. And then, like I said, first aid, I would prioritize over anatomy, class, and fast learner, unless I see discipline, adrenaline, core strength, things of that sort. Or I'm playing me, but if I'm playing Mimi, I will weight it more towards first aid, because knowing that I have less max reason to work with means I might need more reason heal, so there's that. But without further ado, if you watch to the end of this video, I do plan to do the rest. Next should be Miku, the second to last character, and yeah, that'll be my review for Mimi. So if you made it through watching to the end of this video, then I'd like to thank you for watching. I do plan to make other World of Horror content in the future. I have a couple of ideas already, but that should be it for this video. Thank you for watching. JRDNMML, out.